qualifying programmes at Middlesex University. And I began my social work career when I left school with my A-levels at 18 and went to be a residential social worker with children with learning disabilities in Newham. I moved to London to do that. And I think one of the things I'd like to say to you is that I have had a fantastic career in social work. It's endlessly interesting and intellectually and emotionally challenging. And I can really recommend it as a really, really interesting career. And I would like very much to welcome you to my talk today. And we're beginning with you looking into our fantastic amenities at Middlesex University. And I would like you to feel that you can ask me any questions that are on your mind about the idea of having a career in social work or in studying social work at Middlesex University. So what we're suggesting is that you might like to put your questions into the chat, and my really nice assistant, Anjali, will collect them all up and then she'll ask the questions at the end. So I hope that's okay. And I think if okay with all of you, I think that we will start. Okay, so, oh, I hope something's gonna, yeah. So really my talk this afternoon is to help you to think about what do we mean when we talk about a career in social work, and then I'm going to talk to you briefly about what you would be studying if you came to study a degree in social work at Middlesex. And a degree in social work will, once you have successfully completed it, will also mean that you can register with the regulator for social work, which is Social Work England. So we're going to think together about what do we mean by social work. And I'm very conscious, and my lovely students are conscious, that a lot of people don't really know what social work is all about. And sadly, I think sometimes we only hear about social work when maybe things have gone wrong, or so very often the very great work that social workers do is not necessarily discussed in the news. So people sometimes have some misapprehensions, and I would like to maybe, we're going to call it myth busting this afternoon. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce you to a social worker who qualified at Middlesex University 3 years ago. And I thought it would be good for you to hear from her about the kinds of things that she does in her day-to-day life as a social worker. Oh, it's just introducing me. So I'd like to introduce you now to Ruth. Hi Ruth, thank you very much for coming to talk to us this afternoon. I'd like you to begin just by telling us when you actually studied at Middlesex University for your BA social work degree.
I started in 2014 and I graduated nearly 3 years ago now in the summer of 2017.
Wow, time flies, doesn't it?
It really does, yes, it doesn't. I still think of myself as recently qualified, so.
You've had a lot of experience under your belt by now. So could you tell us where you're currently working?
Yeah, so I'm working in East London Local Authority in a child in need stroke child protection team. So I work with children in need, child protection cases, some looked after children as well. So quite a variety of work.
Can you tell me a little bit more about when you go to work every day, what sorts of things are you involved with? And for the people who've come to listen today, I think they'll be interested to know the sorts of things that you're involved in and kind of maybe why children might be referred to your team.
Yeah, so I work with cases where the referral has been made, it's gone through the initial assessment process and has been deemed to have met the threshold for statutory intervention. So then that comes to my team as usually as a child in need case, sometimes already at the stage where it's child protection, which would mean that it's been assessed that the children are experiencing or at risk of significant harm. So one of the threads of work that we do a lot with is that we work with lots of cases where there's domestic abuse within the family. There's quite a lot of cases where there's substance misuse or mental health difficulties. Some of those things are combinations. Lots of cases where children are neglected for one reason or another, or experiencing some form of abuse. So I work with a range. I do quite a lot of court work in the team that I work in. So some cases I inherit when I get them, they're already in court and I'm picking it up and going with that. Other cases, something might happen, or we decide that it's met the threshold where we need to initiate care proceedings. So I'm doing quite a lot of court work, so that involves writing reports for court, giving evidence in court. All of my cases involve visiting children, so different frequencies of visits depending on the case, different frequencies of meetings, different types of meetings. At the moment we're doing very frequent visits because we're doing our visits a little bit differently. Visiting children, doing direct work with children is probably my favourite part of the job.
Now, tell us just a little bit about that. Can you give us an example about when you visit a child, what sort of things you were doing with them?
So at the moment, or usually when I'm going to do face-to-face work?
Maybe just maybe think about a particular example. Doesn't have to be at the moment.
I like to play games with children as part of direct work, and also to establish a relationship. So one of my favourite things to do with children is to play snakes and ladders with them, and I just go with a piece of paper and we draw the board between us and we make the snakes and ladders, and then I get it laminated for them and then they can keep it. And so I can take it back and we can continue to play it. And then what I usually do is introduce additional elements to that. So I might say, if we land on an odd number, we're going to answer a question. And then we'll say, what's something exciting that's happened since the last time I saw you, or something that might have been frightening since the last time I saw you. And so they want me to answer as well, so I'll answer and then say, but what's something that's frightening? This frightened me, but what might be something that's a bit scary for you, because I'm sure some scary things happen to you as well. So try to find out a bit more about what's happening for them in their lives, but through the medium of a game that we can have and that we can continue to play as well. So I can leave it with them and then we can join it and play it again the next time. And that's one of my favourite things to do, because it's a very simple thing to do, but it's quite a good way to form a relationship and find out a bit more about what's happening with the child.
Oh, thank you for that. That gives us a really good kind of window into your world. That is really helpful. And I'm wondering, Ruth, if you could have a think about what kind of skills and what knowledge, and I suppose the value base, do you need, or do social workers need, in order to do their job?
I think we have to be able to reflect on the work that we're doing, on what we're bringing to the work, what we could do differently, what's worked well and what hasn't worked so well, and how we can change that, because I think it's very tempting to, if you found something that works well, to want to use that with every case that you do, and maybe you do that a bit, and then you think, but you need to also be able to say, this isn't working particularly as well with this case, what can I do differently? So I think being able to reflect and change what you do and think about why you're doing that is important. I think trying to be empathetic and to see where people are coming from in a different position than yourself, and like I said before, thinking about what you bring to the work, so your own experiences, your own prejudices, your own values that you're bringing, and thinking about how they influence your decision making, and why you might be particularly worried about something or not so worried. What is it about your own values and experiences that are influencing that? And again, I think actually to link back to university, that's really helpful, because it helps being able to link your own experiences into sort of the theories and the interventions that you learn at university. I think helps you to think about that in a more informed way rather than just using your own instinct to how.
I'm going to leave it there, with Ruth just beginning to think about what university gave her, because I think we'll run a little bit short of time. But I hope that you could see that Ruth is somebody who really enjoys her job, and it's very varied, and she really gained a lot from her time at university to help to equip her for what is a demanding but extremely interesting job. So we're going to quickly run through a few kind of myths and see, how true they are, I suppose. So the first one is, people often think about social workers only in the context of childcare. And in some ways, it's a shame that I showed you Ruth, because it's a job which involves all sorts of areas and people to work with. So people often think, well, if you meet a social worker, you're going to use your child if you work with children's services, and people have that idea that social work is all about snatching children away. And so, do we think that's true? Is that all we do? Let's have a look. So the emphasis in the law, and we largely work on a statutory basis guided by the laws of the land, and we are asked to try to work with families to keep them together. So when we hear that there are children that are in difficulties, our first emphasis is to try to help their families to be more able to look after the children and to find resources that will help them to do that better. So it's really only in exceptional cases that we would recommend that children are removed from parents in their care. And we have to establish that the children are at significant risk of harm. So it's not a sort of just one-off thing. It's something that perhaps because their parents are not able to provide consistent, loving care, or they're perhaps leaving the children alone, abandoning them, etc., or some of the things that Ruth talked about, that we would, after having worked and tried to get changes within the family, that the children are removed. And social workers on their own are not allowed to make those decisions. They're so important that we have, as Ruth said, we have to go to court and ask the judge if we're right in our assessment, or as if there's anything else that we should be doing. So although, as I say, people often think about that as being the main emphasis of social work, I would say it's much more taken from a value base of wanting to protect children. The welfare of children is paramount, but it's also very much about us wanting to help families to make them stronger. So myth number 2, we're nosy people and we just meddle in people's lives. What do you think? Do you think that the government pays people to go and meddle in people's lives? So I suppose our answer to that is that actually, on the whole, people have a right to private family life, and we will only go and work with them if we're requested to do so, or we're recommended. We certainly don't go around knocking on people's doors, sort of saying, let me come and have a look in your house and see how things are going. So either families or adults, individuals come to us because they feel in need of a service, or somebody recommends that we go and visit that family, perhaps because they see them as a family in need, or because they're worried about safeguarding issues. And that could be with a vulnerable adult, maybe somebody with learning disabilities, or with mental health problems, or dementia as an older adult, or families where children's basic needs don't seem to be being met. So I do think to be a social worker, you have to be curious and interested in people's lives, but I don't think we're interested in just going and meddling for the sake of it. Okay, fifth myth number 3. I think I've started to answer that myself. Social workers only work with children and families. Until COVID-19, I think that that was the public conception of social workers' work. And again, very much in a child protection context. But I think that we've begun to have a much better public presence in terms of our work with adults since COVID-19. You know, I think that it's been well established that we are key workers, and that we often are linked with people in care homes. We are, one of my colleagues has recently been working with adults and families who are considered to be no recourse to public funds, and actually the local authority made arrangements for people who came to them with accommodation difficulties, or perhaps were in shared housing. They said that isn't safe during this time where such an infectious disease, and they arranged to move them into much better accommodation. So if you choose to be a social worker, one of the wonderful things about the degree and the qualification is that you have got a huge choice over the way that you work and the service user group that you choose to work with. You know, you could literally be choosing to work with very young children and their families, or you could be working with older people at the very end of their lives, or you might be linked to a hospice. You could be, your job could be working in an adults team with somebody with a learning disability, and maybe you're helping them to make choices and to resettle them into their own flat with a support package, etc. So it's a very wide possibilities if you choose to be a social worker. So myth number 4. Well, a kind heart is enough to be a social worker. What do you think? I would say that a kind heart is absolutely essential to be a social worker. You know, it is all about developing relationships with people. It's about really having the emotional intelligence to be able to see something from somebody else's point of view, and to really walk alongside them when they're having a really difficult time. So I think without a kind heart, I'm not sure you can be a social worker. However, I think it's fair to say that it's not enough. It's not the only thing. And look, all of this. So, you know, you cannot be a social worker unless you have achieved a social work degree or a postgraduate course in social work. It's considered such an important profession that you, it's a protected title. You cannot call yourself a social worker unless you have been through the degree or the postgraduate course. And then you have to have all of these different things. You have to be able to be analytical. You have to be able to gather information and really understand it and think what's going on? What's going on for this child and this family? I wonder what things I could bring that could make a difference. Is there a different way of looking at this? So in order to find out that information, you have to be a very good communicator, and you have to be able to articulate well verbally, but also your written skills. You've got to explain to your manager why this person needs resources. You've got to explain to courts why, sadly, you don't feel that this mother can continue to look after her child. And you have to be able to get on with people. You have to be able to work with a whole variety of professions, because they're our colleagues, and very often they are a part of the jigsaw in this person's life, and they often can provide resources, or they maybe are the people who refer people and families to social workers. So you need to be able to have a good relationship with the police, with the medical profession. You need to be able to feel confident in court, etc. Not to say that you have to do that now, because we will help you to develop the confidence to be able to talk with other professionals. you know, definitely it's all about people, and you have to really like getting to know people, and you do have to want to help them. So you really have to have an open mind to be a social worker, and you need to like working with all different kinds of people and see that you will learn as much from them as they perhaps will from you. We would say that our job is about social justice, and it's really important that you want to champion people's rights and value diversity and challenge discrimination. You know, it's about wanting to create and sustain change in people's lives. It's also, though, it's important to understand that as a social worker, you make decisions which change people's lives. And therefore, we must really be extremely respectful about the power that we hold. And as much as possible, the principle for social workers is that we share that power, and that we are here to empower people to take more decisions in their own lives. I think things which people may not always think about as being social work skills, but you really do have to have good organisational skills. You often are managing a very busy caseload, and you have to be able to manage your time well. And then, as I said before, you're making decisions which can change people's lives sometimes, and that's quite an anxiety-provoking thing. And although it's not something that you will ever make on your own, it will be part of a team decision, it might be shared with the court or other professionals, you do have to manage the uncertainty of wanting to make those decisions and not being 100% sure that what you're recommending is right. Only time will tell whether the decisions that you made were the right ones. So I've said before, and I'm going to maybe whiz through the next few slides because I want there to be time for you to talk to me. But I want to quickly help you to see that being a social worker will enable you to have a lot of different roles. So I've started to mention already in my talk different kinds of social work, and I wonder, as I just turn the slide, if you can think of who you might work with as a social worker. Let's see if you're right. We'll look here. So you might choose to specialise in working in either private agencies like fostering agencies, or you might choose to work in the voluntary sector, places, people like the NSPCC or Quorum, Mind, all sorts of voluntary agencies. And you could be working in a children and family setting. And so the sorts of things you would be doing would be thinking about child safeguarding and protection. You might, as I've spent most of my career working in fostering, adoption and special guardianship, so helping children to form new family relationships while still being mindful of the importance of their existing and original families. You might well work in a youth offending team. You might work with child and adolescent mental health. But equally, you might decide that you want to specialise as a social worker in working with adults, and these will be vulnerable adults. So it might be adults in need of safeguarding, it could be adults with physical or learning disabilities, and you could be working in a hospital setting or a community setting. You might be working with adults with substance misuse, addiction difficulties, or with adult or parental mental health conditions. And I'm not going to go through them all here, but here's just a very, very small list of the kinds of things that you would be involved in. I think, you know, the variety of the jobs there shows you what an interesting career it is. And I think how I like the fact that I feel that I'm learning new skills every day. And as we understand research better in certain areas, you know, our knowledge base is increasing. Well, I think actually I've said that already. I've talked about the fact that you could be working with charities. Okay, so now I'm just going to sort of finish by whizzing through a little bit about, I hope that I've persuaded you that a career in social work, although demanding and challenging, is really interesting and something which could be a career for life. In order to become a social worker, you need to obtain your degree in social work. And I think I'm going to just talk a little bit about why you might be interested to come to Middlesex. The first thing I would want to tell you is that what our students say about us is that we're an extremely approachable team. We really do have a great teaching team, and all of them are qualified social workers, but they are also now qualified teachers at an HEI level. We are very interested in personally making a difference, so we also are involved in research, and we bring our experience from practice into our teaching. I'll go on to tell you a little bit about the course later, but an essential part of a social work degree is that you have 2 placements where you learn on the job how to be a social worker, and you're bringing in the theoretical knowledge from the university and the law that you're learning, etc., and you practice it, and you're supported and assessed throughout that time. And we have been an established programme for nearly 20 years. And in fact, even before that, there was social work at Middlesex. I know because I qualified on the postgraduate degree, as I say, about 30 years ago now. And so we've had the chance to develop excellent relationships with organisations and local authorities within North London and North East London. So we're able to give you really good quality placements. We're also very proud of the fact that we have an absolutely fantastic library. You know, obviously if you come to study at degree level, you're looking to understand the evidence base on which social work practices. And so obviously it involves a lot of reading, although I have to say there's also quite a lot of film watching, documentaries, etc. But our library is open normally for 24/7. We also have an awful lot of e-books, so you don't even have to come into the library. And we have also extremely good librarians who are very willing to be approached and will help you with all of the work that you're doing. Students often like the fact that they are able to get free printing. Something else that students like actually is the Hendon campus. It's got a very nice friendly feel. It feels quite professional, but it also feels very sort of friendly. There is an excellent experience of blended learning on our course. And by that I mean, and I think partly, I'm sure some of your questions might be what's going to happen in response to COVID-19. But our courses have always been a very good blend of face-to-face teaching, small groups, small seminars, skills teaching, teaching on the job, and also online learning. And what I mean by online learning is something like today, where we might have a seminar group. I'll have asked you to have done some reading or to have watched something, and then we'll come along and talk about it. And we will apply it to case studies, etc. And you can do that just as well online as you can do in a physical classroom. But we also have online quizzes, we have discussion boards, you share ideas with each other. So we use our online learning platforms very fully. So if you came, what would it look like? Well, normally there's about 30 to 40 other BA students, and we are very proud of our very diverse student group, because we recognise that that is a real opportunity for you to learn from each other. All of us, even actually if we come from the same cultural backgrounds, always there is difference, but actually within our student group there are people of all ages, of different sexual orientation, of different cultures and different ethnicities. And I think this really helps us to be able to work with all sorts of people who we might perceive of as different, and actually become to see that we have as much in common as there are differences. I think I've talked to you about some of these other things. In year one, there will be lectures. This year, the lectures will be online, but as I say, there will be a mixture of live and pre-recorded. There will be lots of workshops, and some of those will be in the university campus, but they will also be recorded, because we know that particularly early in the programme, there may be some students who may still be shielding and not able to come onto campus. So, you know, we're very much thinking about student experience and wanting you to get as much out of it as you possibly can. We also will give you reading tasks every week. And as I say, we help you with that because we give you free online textbooks, one per module, and we also digitise chapters. If any of you are thinking about exams, we actually don't have any exams, it's all coursework. And there's 2 formal days of study, but we do expect it's a full-time course that you will spend your time doing your reading and preparing presentations and things throughout the week. So the next few slides really just give you a whistle-stop tour of what you would be learning. But in the first year, you will undertake 4 modules, and they prepare you with enough knowledge and skills in order to be going out onto placement in the second year, where you'll have a 70-day placement. And as I say, you know, this is a lot about the context of social work. So you learn about social policy, but you also learn about the life stages that people go through, so that you're able to engage in what you expect people to be being able to do at that stage, and maybe some thoughts about what are the barriers, why aren't they achieving in the way they might want to. You learn about social work values, you learn about the concept that we use, theories, we use the law, and you begin to learn foundation knowledge and skills that will make you feel confident to go out onto your first placement. We do a mixture of role plays, discussion groups, written tasks, and we have quite a lot of fun, to be honest with you. Okay, so in year 2, you'll be going out on a 70-day placement. That's 3 days a week. We find that placement for you, and it's usually in the voluntary sector, in a wide variety of agencies. But we also, in this year, will teach you about the main range of theories that we use. We apply them to how do you use that in practice. You'll be learning about the main pieces of legislation that social workers use, and you'll also be learning about how to read research. This is very important because social workers don't just make up what they do on the back of an envelope. They have to be able to evidence that this way of working actually does work for people. And we learn about that from research. In the 3rd year, you will again have another placement. This one is longer, and you will be practicing the law much more and applying it. So you'll be undertaking statutory tasks. You will have the chance to choose whether you want to go on an adults pathway and specialise in adult services, or whether you want to go on a children and families pathway. And I think in the years 1 and 2, you begin to think about which is it that I would prefer to do. And you have a module which will give you, will equip you with everything that you need as a newly qualified social worker in your specialist path. And the 3rd module in the middle here helps you to learn, have a deeper knowledge about how to apply theories so that you can really work effectively to help the people that you're setting out to work with. So if you would like to come to us, and we hope that you will, you apply through UCAS. You must have maths and English at least to GCSE level 4, and you need a minimum of 120 UCAS points, and that could be in a variety of ways. It could be having achieved a BTEC level 3. It could, some people come because they've done an access course, or it could be that you've got 3 A levels, usually to a level of BBB or ABC. And if you have further questions about that, you'd be very welcome to talk to our Middlesex admissions team. You will need to do a personal statement, and you will really have to, it's a highly competitive course, and in that personal statement we would want to know why you are choosing social work. So if you're not really sure about social work and you sort of maybe applying for lots of different courses, I think sometimes that comes across, and it's really important that you are definitely choosing social work, and that you give us some examples about when you've helped or supported vulnerable adults and children. Maybe you've done youth work. Once we've looked at that and you meet our initial admissions criteria, you will be asked to do an online test. And actually this year, because of COVID-19, we're asking you to write us 2 essays that you then send back to us. Now, we don't expect you to have 30 years experience of social work, but we want you to have an initial idea about what the social work role could be. And also we're really looking to see that you can make an argument, that you can actually structure an essay, and that we will be looking at things like that that your grammar, punctuation is okay, because it's so important for social workers to be able to articulate what they're saying in the written word. So we write such a lot of reports, and obviously we'll be really interested in your references. So what are we looking for from you? Well, we want people who are really enthusiastic about helping other people and wanting to make a difference in people's lives. I think it's really important that you are an empathic person. We also need people who are determined to succeed and curious and creative. You're coming to do a degree, so you really do have to like reading, and to know that you're used to gathering information and then you're being able to explain it on the page. But we also want you to be interested in social policy documentaries. Maybe you've looked at TED Talks, but also I think you learn things from the arts. So we'd be very interested in the kinds of novels that you read, the poetry that you read, whether it's performance art, about the music that you listen to. What's that telling you about the world and about people's experiences? As I said, we test your literacy. We're interested in whether you can communicate your ideas clearly. As a social worker, and this is why I have to stop in a minute, you have to be a good listener. So I think you have to think, yes, do I let other people talk? Do I try and make sense of what they're saying? And I think for this stage, what we want is to know that you've got an awareness of the social work issues. Why do you think people find they need a social worker? What is it, what's going on in society that maybe means that they can't just get on with their lives and manage on their own? And then I think you have to have a sense and an understanding of yourself. Like maybe I've had life experiences that might help me to understand this. But has that only just happened to me? Would that make me quite upset if I met somebody who's in having the same experience as me? Will it make it all bring it back to me? And that might be a sign that maybe I would be good at doing this, but maybe not just now. Okay. So if you become a social worker, there are really excellent career prospects. I have to say that I think there are always going to be jobs for social workers. And as I say, it's in a wide variety of settings. And you actually also can have very good work prospects and conditions. There's also good progress. So, sometimes people are social workers forever, but sometimes they want to a career into management. And that's certainly possible. Some people like me become academics. If you'd like to know any more, obviously you can ask questions from me in a moment, but you're also welcome to contact Bola Ogunaike. She is our social work admissions tutor, and she'd be very happy to hear from you. Or you might like to look at our website. So I think now it's time for questions, if there are any. I hope that you've enjoyed my talk, and I hope I haven't gabbled too much. I feel like I've rushed through.
Thank you for that, Sarah. That was a really insightful and informative talk, and we do have some questions. But before I get into the questions, I'm just going to launch a poll that I'd like everyone to fill in. Don't worry, it's completely anonymous. So if you'd like to fill that in, please do so. And I will just ask the first question. So the first question was, is it an option of what area of social work you work in, or is it given to you random?
That's a good question. And I think the answer is that we would like you to come on our course to be as open-minded as possible. Sometimes people say, I only want to do this. But actually social work, even if you end up getting a job, say, with youth offending, you actually still need to understand about children and families in general. So when you come on the course, we would ask you to have a little bit of an open mind and try things out that you hadn't thought of before. Certainly, I always wanted to be a children and family social worker, but on my course, I had a placement in probation, and I had another placement that was in a family welfare. It was like a counselling setting. And I can honestly say that I've used the learning from both of those placements in my social work in the last 30 years. Having said that, by the time you get to the halfway through the second year, we will be saying to you, would you like to specialise in adult social work? Because there's particular law that is relevant to adults or children and families. Because again, different legislation applies. You'll be applying the same kind of theories, but there'll be different interventions. You'll be looking at different research. So there is definitely choice. What we would ask you to do, though, is that whichever pathway you choose, I think it's important to be open to having different learning experiences within that. Because as I say, it's really important that you understand the whole of the journey and the whole of the resources. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea.
Thank you for that. Rachel asks, where is best to do work experience before your degree, i.e. nursing homes, care homes or schools?
I would say that absolutely any of those three would be invaluable. It's really about what you get out of it. And I think that each of those ideas is a chance to work with people and to understand that people have different lives and different needs. And that's what I would want to hear about, Rachel, if you were coming for an interview or if you were writing about it in an essay for me. And we actually place students in their first placement in all of those settings, because we recognise that relationship building, understanding about the main organisations that refer into social services are those settings. So if we're going to work well with them, you know, we need to understand how does schools work, what resources, what services do they offer, how do they deal with child protection, etc. You know, and it's a good idea, if I'm going to be an adult social worker, that I really understand the preoccupations and the concerns of my colleagues who work in care homes. So fantastic to work in any or all of them, I would say.
Thank you for that, Sarah. We have one last question, and it is there any problem for a foreign student to study this course at Middlesex from the UE?
I suspect there might be a question behind that, but I would say that we have international students, we have students from the EU, we have students who are, you know, obviously born in the UK. So we really welcome diversity. You will be being trained to UK law, but having said that, many students that train with us go on to work abroad, and I've recently been writing a reference for somebody who wants to go on to do social work in Australia. In fact, I've had 2 this year. So we would certainly welcome and we welcome people who have got their qualifications from abroad, and our admissions tutors work out, that they are equivalent. So I would say very much we welcome people from all over the world, actually.
Thank you for that, Sarah. I think we don't have any more questions for now, but thank you so much for giving such an insightful and informative presentation, and thank you for your time. If anyone else has any other questions, you can email Sarah and the department on the emails that she showed before. And yes, thank you so much to everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and listening. And whatever you choose to do, I really hope that you have a really successful and happy time in the next stage in your life. So do take care, and I hope to see some of you one of these days. Bye.